Thanks to the sponsor of today's video, AIPER. Hey guys, welcome back to the Nursery Makeover series. We now have less than 2 months to finish this room and we still have a long ways to go. In case you missed it, this wall behind me used to have a closet and a door going into the home office, but we closed up the door and did some demo, so now we have a nice blank wall. In the last video, I shared how to install these two IKEA PAX units, and in this video, I'm sharing some wallpaper tips and tricks, and I'm also sharing how I trimmed out this big window. Let's first take a look at the wallpaper. I'm going with this woodland themed wallpaper from Nestig. The name of it is Busy Brook. We are waiting to find out whether baby will be a boy or a girl, so we're doing a gender neutral nursery. We went with the linen color, but they also have pink and blue. You can find this linked in the description below. Devin and I both grew up in Wisconsin. We love being outdoors and we hope to one day have a bunch of land and raise our children in the countryside, loving the outdoors and exploring. We can't quite make that work as we move around with Devin in the military, so instead we are bringing the countryside home. I want this nursery to feel like a peaceful, sunny countryside, and this wallpaper is perfectly fitting. This is a traditional wallpaper that requires paste. It's not peel and stick, but some of the tips that I talk about will apply to peel and stick wallpaper as well. These are the tools that I use for hanging wallpaper. Everything is linked in the description below. I recommend working on a long table if you can, especially if you're applying paste to your wallpaper, but for me it was just easiest to lay everything out on the floor. Before hanging up the wallpaper, there's some prep work that needs to be done. First, you need to pay attention to the type of texture that's on your walls. Generally, you'll want your walls to be as smooth as possible so that none of the texture shows through your wallpaper. Some wallpaper is thick enough that it won't show any texture. Just be sure to look at the specific application instructions for your wallpaper to determine if you need to have smooth walls or not. This is a very thick and high quality wallpaper, but they still recommend having smooth walls, so I'm going to go ahead and try to make them as smooth as I can. There's a few ways to smooth the texture on your walls. One is sanding, and two is applying a skim coat to your walls. We have plaster walls and just some light bumpy texture, so I tried a few different techniques. There's no way a little block sander would make a difference on these plaster walls. It's like sanding concrete, so instead I used my orbital hand sander to knock down some of the bumps. This was taking a while, so I thought maybe I'll try doing a skim coat instead. I started doing that and I was making such a mess, and I'll have to make even more of a mess sanding the joint compound, so I gave up on that and went back to sanding the texture. If you have heavily textured drywall, a skim coat may be your only option because you don't want to damage your drywall with a sander. So if that's the case, pick up some joint compound and a long drywall knife and apply a thin coat or two of joint compound to your walls. After the joint compound is dry, you can take a block sander and sand them down smooth. I went around the room with the orbital hand sander and knocked down all the bumps on the top half of the wall since I'm only doing wallpaper on the top half. After sanding, I went around and wiped down all the walls so that they were dust-free. Now, whether you did sanding or did joint compound, you'll want to apply a coat of primer to your walls so that your wallpaper sticks better. My wallpaper instructions recommended Roman Pro 935. I couldn't find that in stores, so instead I used this Roman Pro 999, which is very similar. This primer dries clear and it leaves a bit of a tack, which makes it a super great bonding surface for your wallpaper. We had to do some drywall patchwork on our walls previously, so we had two different tones going on with the white drywall compound and the gray wall paint. I wish I would have primed or painted the walls one solid color first, like white or the same gray, especially with white wallpaper, because on this first section you can very slightly see the different wall colors behind the wallpaper. So major tip, make sure your walls are all one solid color before wallpapering. Now that the primer is finished and dried, let's prep the wallpaper. Here's the wallpaper adhesive that was recommended in the instructions of the wallpaper. It's supposed to have great adhesion and also allow you to strip the wallpaper later on without damage. It says that you can apply this paste directly to the walls or onto the wallpaper. I've done wallpaper in the past where you apply it to the wallpaper, then you have to book the wallpaper, folding in the edges, and that is such a headache. So I tried applying the paste directly to the walls and it was so much easier. This wallpaper comes in a 19¼ inch width and either 4, 8, 10, or 12-foot lengths. There are wallpaper calculators online that you can use if the supplier of the wallpaper doesn't already have one for you to use. I got 8-foot panels, but I'm only going about 5 feet down the wall, so I pre-cut each panel to 5 feet before I hung it. I chose the corner of the room that I wanted to start in. This wallpaper comes in pattern panel A and pattern panel B, so I made sure to work clockwise. It's very important for your first panel to go up level so that it doesn't throw off the rest of the panels. To ensure this, I took a level, measured out 19¼ inches, and marked a level line where the edge of the first panel needs to sit. Fortunately, we are installing crown molding over top of the wallpaper, so the wallpaper didn't need to go all the way to the ceiling. I had a few inches to play with there, so that made it a lot easier. I'm also applying hardboard to the bottom half of the walls and it will go over top of the wallpaper a bit, so I didn't have to be exact where the wallpaper ended either. If you do have to be spot on at the ceiling, I recommend installing the wallpaper with a bit of overhang at the top so that you could just trim off the excess nice and straight with a utility blade after each panel is installed. I have my guideline marked out and I have my first panel cut down to size. Now I'm taking a large paintbrush and applying a thick coat of the wallpaper adhesive. You could also use a roller, but I was able to control the paste more with a paintbrush. I grabbed the wallpaper and started to stick it to the wall near the ceiling. Once it was sticking to the wall, I worked my way down that guideline to make sure the wallpaper followed that line perfectly. After the panel was level, I continued to smooth out the rest of the wallpaper onto the wall. I either used a dry paintbrush to smooth it out or I used a drywall knife to smooth it out. I wouldn't recommend a drywall knife because you risk tearing the wallpaper, but like I said, I just applied super light pressure to get any bubbles out and I was fine. I recommend using a plastic flat edge like this instead. For each new panel, I measured and marked a few guidelines where the next panel will end so that I knew how far out to spread the wallpaper adhesive. I slathered on the wallpaper adhesive and followed the same step as the first panel. Where there was an outlet or a doorway, I used either a utility blade or scissors to cut the wallpaper. For this doorway panel, I measured and pre-cut the wallpaper first, hung the wallpaper, and then cut out the switch as I went with my utility blade. I didn't have too many objects that I had to work around, which was nice. I followed the same steps for this whole wall, and this wallpaper was going up super fast. For the corner here, I decided to throw a bunch of wallpaper adhesive in the corner and then just wrap my wallpaper around the corner. You could cut the wallpaper and then start the pattern again, but this worked out just fine. I plan to trim out these windows later on, so I didn't have to be super exact with where the wallpaper landed around the window. It's going to be covered with 3 1/4 inches of trim anyway, so I threw up the wallpaper and then used a scissors to cut the window out. I mentioned earlier that you could see 2 different tones of gray paint and the white drywall compound on my first panel that I put up. So to avoid that here, I applied a coat of white primer to make the wall one solid color. I also primed the area in between the closets because there were tons of colors going on there. I decided to take the wallpaper all the way down in between the closets. I may add some fancy trim over top, but we'll see. The wallpaper looks amazing, but there are some areas that you can still see some of the wall texture. We have very lightly textured walls, and this wallpaper is very thick, so I was a bit surprised, but lesson learned. Always take the time to prep your walls and make them smooth before hanging wallpaper. Before we move on to the window trim, I'm going to take a little pool break thanks to the sponsor of today's video, AIPER. Devin's parents live about an hour away and they have this beautiful pool, so I like to sneak down here when I need a little R&R. They also had some baby clothes from Devin for me to go through, so I took a little trip to pick up some baby clothes, and I took this opportunity to hang by the pool and test out this new pool cleaner. This is the AIPER Scuba S1 Pro. It's a cordless robotic pool cleaner. This has a handful of different cleaning modes: auto, eco, waterline, floor line, and wall only. You can set it on eco mode for easy, carefree maintenance, and it will run for 45 minutes 3 times a week. I was amazed watching this thing climb up the pool walls. The horizontal waterline cleaning removes up to 99% of oil, limescale, and algae. This cleaner has premium cleaning and performance with dual active PVC rollers and quad brushless motor for maximum scrubbing and suction. The AIPER Scuba S1 Pro is designed for the toughest cleaning jobs, and you can find the link in the description below. It was great to take a little break from nursery projects to hang by the pool, but we still have a lot of work to do. Now let's work on trimming out this window. I'm going with a more traditional style for the window trim. There's so many different styles and trim work available. I recommend going online and finding a picture of what you like and then trying to replicate it. I recently trimmed out our home office window the same way, and I'm slowly going to trim out the rest of the windows in the house to match. Before starting the trim, I removed all the old caulking around the window so that my new trim pieces fit in there nice and snug. First, I'm going to install the window jamb. There's a few ways to do this. You can build the entire box first and then set it in place. I'm just going to piece it in, starting with the bottom stool piece. Our window jambs are 5 inches deep, so I'm using 1x6s and ripping them down to 5 inches to fit inside the left, right, and top window jamb. For the bottom stool piece, I want it to extend past the wall about 1.5 inches, so I bought a 1x8 board that I will rip down to 6.5 inches. I want the bottom stool piece to also extend 1.5 inches past the window casing, which is about 3.5 inches, so lengthwise lengthwise, I made sure to add an extra 4 inches on each side. I ripped down each of the boards and then marked out any areas that I needed to notch out. To notch these areas out, I'm using my jigsaw. Our old windows have a tile sill and they're very difficult to take out, so instead I'm going to install my bottom stool piece right to the tile with some strong adhesive. I set some weights on top and I'll let the adhesive set overnight. Next, I cut all the 5-inch boards to length to fit in the left, right, and top side of the window jamb. I secured them to the window framing with 1.5-inch brad nails. We have the window jamb installed. Now let's install the casing and apron pieces. I took measurements for the left and right side casing pieces first, making sure to leave a 1/4 inch reveal around the window jamb. I mitered the corners of the casing and then installed the casing with 1.5-inch brad nails. For the top casing piece, I took a measurement from long end to long end and mitered each of the corners. I secured the top casing with 1.5-inch brad nails. The best practice is to glue the mitered joints and nail them together, but I'm on a time crunch and that's what caulking is for. Last but not least, let's install the bottom apron piece. I beveled each end of the apron piece 45 degrees, and then I'm going to cut a small return piece so that the trim pattern continues around the corner. I centered the apron piece so that it lines up with the casing above and secured it with 1.5-inch brad nails. For my small return pieces, I glued them up and taped them in place until the wood glue dried. All the trim work is installed. Now it's time to fill nail holes, caulk, and then paint. This trim work is such a simple detail, but it enhances the look of the entire room. If you're working on trim work anytime soon, go online and check out different styles. There's so much you can do to customize your trim and make it complement the style of your home. The wallpaper is finished, the window trim is finished, and this nursery is starting to look better already. That's all for this week's progress. In the next video, I'll be installing wall molding on the bottom half of the walls. I'll be installing crown molding, base trim, and doing some painting. So stay tuned for more nursery progress to come.